Hello guys, I'm Ethan Woodworth. I am back again with another episode of the Stoic Sapling podcast. I just came off of spring break. I was in Anna Maria Island for a week with everybody else from my school, and it was a fun week. And I'm glad I'm back. I'm getting back in the groove of just doing what I do, going to the gym, doing schoolwork. I'm studying for this big calculus exam we have. It is 35% of our grade. So life is good currently. I got a full slate of things I need to get done, and this podcast was just another of them. This is going to be episode number 15, and it's crazy to me that I've already hit 15 episodes off this podcast. I originally told myself when I started this, I'm not allowed to quit until I put out 100 episodes. So I'm roughly, an eighth of the way there? So so I got a long way to go if I ever want to just shut this down, because I'm not going to let myself just conform and end this thing. It's got to be, I got to have tried 100 episodes before I call it quits. So the viewers have around 85 more episodes of the Stoic Sapling podcast until they won't see anymore, which is probably a few years. If I release one every 2 weeks, 52 divided by 2 is what? 26? So then that's 26 episodes per year. Yeah, it'd be a few years until I quit the Stoic Sapling podcast. So I'm here to stay. Today I'm going to be discussing a variety of topics again, but I'm going to start with just some stoic shit. That's what we're starting with, some stoic shit. And specifically, I have some quotes here written out from some famous Stoic philosophers. I'm just going to touch on these quotes and kind of add my own spin like I do on most other things I mention here, whether it's a book, movie. Just going to discuss it, and that's what we're doing today. And I think all these quotes here are either from Marcus Aurelius or Epictetus, who is another Stoic philosopher. So the first quote here is, I'm pretty sure this one's Marcus. And it says here, man is not worried by real problems so much as by his imagined anxieties about real problems. You know, when I read that out loud, it's hard for me to dissect. I have to read things in my head. When I read it out loud, it just feels like my only goal is to put it out to you guys, not actually think about what I'm saying, if that makes any sense. But this quote, it's just about real problems and creating your own just imagined anxieties about real problems. This just always makes me question, how many real problems have I actually faced? And I guess it depends on what perspective you're taking. Like, I face quote-unquote real problems every single day. They may be minimal, but it happens. Whether it's a door that got jammed on my carpet, and that's a problem. I have to move the carpet to open the flipping door. There's a problem like that, but I think that this quote's talking about like the life or death, the big problems that impact your week by week, month by month, year by year life. Obviously, this quote was said 2,000 years ago, when food, shelter, water were a lot harder to come by than the modern world. And the medicine back then wasn't near as good either. People weren't living, it was a blessing to live the 40 years back 2,000 years ago. That was, you had a pretty solid life. You're doing pretty well if you made it to 40. You know, it was tough to even make it past 6 months of living back then because of how just poor medicine was. And I think those are the real problems that Marcus is talking about here, are those life or death. Am I going to make it out? Am I going to get food on my plate? Am I going to get water? Those, I think, are real problems. And how many of those real problems have I ever faced? None. None. There's not been a time where I've struggled to get food. There's not been a time where I've struggled to get water. And that's a good thing. Like, it's not a bad thing. It's a blessing to say that I've never had to face a quote unquote real problem. But on the flip side of that adds in a lot of perspective. I've talked with Teddy on here. He's done a mission trip, and I'm pretty sure everybody that's taken a mission trip to a third world country can say the same, that it flipped a switch in their brain. And they realized what they have. They realized how lucky they are to live in this country and to live with parents who can actually put food on the table and water on the table. That all makes sense, and I've talked about it on here plenty of times. But I think the latter part of this quote, where it says, by his imagined anxieties about real problems. And my mind immediately goes to social media. Once again, I've talked about this plenty of times on here. But I find this true for myself. When I spend more time on social media, I begin to culminate more anxieties. Specifically, I think the biggest one is, am I doing enough? Because you compare. And it's where my mind goes. You look at something else and say, I want that. I want to attain that. And I don't know if that's just some faulty wiring of my brain, why it comes to that, or it's just a human quality. I'm not one to say, because maybe I'm just weird, but that's how I work. This happened again recently. I'm doing a project for my entrepreneurship class at Zionsville right now. And the project is, you're supposed to make your own business. The business I'm making is a membership system where you can go to these secluded areas all around the world and read books just by swiping your membership card, going to this area and picking up a book. And that sounds awesome. It's like a dream fantasy world for me to be able to go to some cool ass place in the world and just be alone and pick up some books. Sounds awesome on paper. But then you have to start buying the land for all these places that is super, super expensive. And one of the places I chose was Big Sur, California. And Big Sur is right on the edge of the coastline. It's on that Highway 101, and it is an awesome, awesome place. The waters just look beautiful there. There's some rocky just edges, and it's mystical. It looks like you're in some sort of TV or movie. It's like where Tony Stark's mansion would be back in Iron Man. That's kind of what I envision when I see Big Sur and me building property there. And that's when I started actually researching, okay, how much does it actually cost to buy land on Big Sur that I could then build a house or start this business on? Not that I actually would, but just kind of like living in fantasy land for a minute. And I checked online, and I think 2 acres was over like $2 million for some land in Big Sur. And it was just amazing to see how expensive this was. And when I was living in that fantasy land for a second, I had my earbuds in, I was just like a different planet, looking at this plot of land that's just beautiful and overlooks the ocean. And I just had these thoughts of like, I need to get money. I need to buy this piece of property so I can build my big ass house and raise my family on this coastline with my big Tony Stark mansion right on Big Sur. And it was like legit like 10 seconds of me just being like, yeah, that all makes sense. Life is just going to be bliss once I get to this place. Once I get to my big mansion in Big Sur, life will be perfect. And obviously I snapped out of that because I realized that's not realistic at all. And who the hell ever wants to pay that much for property or a house? You can just visit there and camp there. That's enough. So it's enticing, that lifestyle of just lots of land and big houses and cars and hot women. It's enticing. And I want it, and I have those visions of me just having it all. But you don't have it all, because what sacrifices would I have to make to get there? How miserable would I be getting there? Would that actually bring me fulfillment? All those questions just come back up. And that right there is just a prime example of imagined anxieties. Me worrying about how I'm pretty much going to get to this unattainable level of wealth. And how my life is going to just blossom once I get to this fantasy land. I think those are the problems that cloud people. Those are the problems that blind people. So that's the first quote. Second quote here is by Epictetus. I don't know if I'm saying his name right. I really hope I am. I don't want to sound stupid. It says here, choose not to be harmed and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed and you haven't been. So this sort of step-by-step rationale is what I try to tap into more often, because you can choose to be harmed at anything you want. That's why it says choose not to be harmed. I can be harmed by every little thing that happens to me on a day-to-day basis. And you see it a lot, I would say. I don't want to pick on older generation because they're great. They're great people. But it just reminds me of like a grumpy old 70-year-old man. And everything that happens to him, it bothers the hell out of him. And life is just futile. This is pointless. Every step I make, every step I take, just lands me 2 steps backwards. It's unfair. My wife sucks. She won't cook me enough food. This is awful. That's just the result of taking that victim mentality and choosing to be harmed in every little scenario. And instead of taking that route, just choose the other side and learn to laugh it off and learn to move on. An example recently is I've been growing my hair out, and I'm growing my hair out until 2023 unless I owe one of my buddies $200. I made this deal. This wasn't anybody else. I just want to do it because I've always chickened out when I've said I'm going to do it in the past. So it's happening this time for sure. But I've been at jiu-jitsu and I catch a lot of heat for the hair because it's going all sorts of directions, and I get called a lot of names. I'll say 2 of them here. Some of them I can't even say on the podcast. But 2 of them we have are Retarded Einstein, number 1. My buddy, I won't say his name, but he's an older gentleman, and Retarded Einstein is what he coined me. And I don't mind it. I don't mind it at all. It's kind of a compliment, I guess, because a stupid Einstein would still be a very smart man. So that's one of the nicknames I've been getting for the hair. Another one is Joker, because, Joker's kind of got the hair going all over the place. It's kind of stringy, a little curly. And those are the 2 nicknames that I've kind of got at jiu-jitsu. It's one of those things where they give me those nicknames because they know I can take it. And I'm not going to sit here and be angry and cry and choose to be harmed, in other words, by their words and by their actions. I don't care. Call me what you want. I made this decision. I really don't care how stupid I look. It's my body. I just choose not to be harmed. I laugh it off. It's funny. And that sort of thinking and that sort of just being able to laugh things off is a theme that I've just tried to pick up all throughout life. I think people will gravitate towards the person who can laugh things off and who isn't all business-like all the time. The grumpy grandpa that's just out here to be serious and to just have this blank facial expression. People will gravitate towards the other one that's jovial and likes to laugh a lot and is able to talk to you about anything, anytime, anywhere. And that just kind of reflects my favorite social situations in life. I would say my best social situations have been when I'm around a group of individuals that all feel the same way, and that you can laugh about anything, and you can poke and prod at anything, and you can discuss anything. There's no limits because you're all just so comfortable with who you are and with who the others are. There's no sense of comparison. There's no sense of superiority. It's all just good fun, and everyone is enjoying it. And those situations are always better than the ones where maybe you're constantly debating what you should say, and you're always thinking your words maybe through so much that it's debilitating because you're like, if I say this, will this person get angry? Will this come out right or wrong? It's kind of like how you would talk to your bosses at work. That's how it feels sometimes in social situations with people that bring those vibes and that give off the feeling that they're more businesslike and more serious and can't take a joke all that well. I think another good example of this is when I was in middle school, we had a group of friends and awesome dudes, and I always felt comfortable around them. But it's when we got into social situations with older kids, and let's say they were like a year, 2 years older, it only got worse the older the kids got. And I always just got super uncomfortable because usually the older kids in middle school would treat you as superiors, and it'd feel like you're talking to your bosses, and you don't want to screw up your words. You don't want to say the wrong thing and then have them make fun of you and have them come after you. So usually I would just resort to not saying anything at all, or just trying to portray myself in the coolest way possible. And usually the coolest way possible would be 1, making fun of somebody else, 2, just listening to whatever the older person had to say and acting like you're interested in what they were saying or thought what they were saying was funny. Those were like the 2 ways to win with these older kids. And that's just kind of how it was, and that's the dynamic when you get a bunch of middle schoolers and some are older than the others. And that's exactly how I felt. That just reminds me of this quote. I chose to be harmed in those scenarios. I cared so much about these external factors and what people thought of me. I should have just chose not to be harmed and just did my own thing and approached people with a smile and talked to them about whatever, because the conversations would have went a lot smoother and there wouldn't have been all that pent up bad energy within the mixing of the groups. All right, I only hit 2 of those quotes, but I'm going to move on here. The second section I want to talk about is just the duality of characters you see in everybody. And by that I mean I act differently around different people, and that's a fact. And some people might immediately stop me there and say, whoa, whoa, whoa. Are you admitting that you're a fake person and that you act differently in front of different people? And to that I would say, I'm admitting that I act different in front of different people. That doesn't mean I'm a fake person. And here's what I mean by that. I just think it's a natural human response to portray yourself depending on who's around you. And that's a good thing, because you don't want to act a certain way around a certain group of people in a certain scenario. Like, again, if you were going for a job interview, you would not act like you're out at a bar with your buddies at 10 o'clock on a Saturday night. It just would not go well. And it's a natural tendency to match your actions and words with who you're around. And I feel I'm especially this way, and I'm especially just cognizant of who I'm around and how I'm putting myself out, because recently I've taken some career and personality tests, and I find these extremely, extremely challenging to answer. Some of the questions like extrovert or introvert, or are you more childish or serious? You have to choose one or the other. And it's like, well, in this scenario I act like this, but in this scenario I act like this. And then in this scenario I act like this. And it just confuses the hell out of me, because I'm like, I don't know. I portray myself in different ways to different groups of people. But that does not mean that my core values and that the things that make up my character, aka Ethan, don't go away. Those always stay the same, and those are always at the bottom of how I'm portraying myself. I think the dangerous territory is where you're changing your core values and your core beliefs to appease the different groups around you. That's dangerous. And that's what I think an insecure person would do, is they would change that core persona that makes them up just to make a new friend or just to relate to a chick. Obviously, I've done that at some point too. I have definitely said something along the lines of, yeah, I totally like pit bulls. They're my favorite dog ever. They're so nice and caring, and they don't just rip people's heads off. You are correct. That I have said that at some point, probably. But to give a more specific example of what I mean and why it's kind of hard for me to answer those questions, my mind always goes to how I act in group settings. So if we're in a party scenario and there's 15 plus people, I get quiet and I get awkward. I'm a bit more reserved, because there's just so much going on that my mind cannot handle it. It is overstimulating. Hearing so many different conversations, so many people talking at once, it makes my brain go bananas. And that's why I kind of just go into a shell and I get reserved and quiet. I don't not enjoy it. I have fun in groups, but it's not my scene, and it's not what I enjoy as much. And I think it feels like when I do try to talk, I just cannot get my words out as much. And I can't articulate near as well as when it's maybe, say, 2 to 5 people. On the flip side of that, I'm not reserved at all. If you came to talk to me in a one-on-one scenario, or just 3-person, 4-person scenario, I'm a conversationalist. I love talking, and I love talking to people. I love listening to people. That's just part of my character. That's why I would claim I'm an extrovert. But if you saw me at social scenarios, if you saw me doing this or that, you'd probably say, wait, no, he's introverted. But that's just my duality of character, and I act differently in different scenarios. Does that mean that I change who Ethan is? No, it doesn't. It's just who I am and how I act. And it's still the same me at the end of the day, but just different scenarios. I guess I'm making this point of just this duality of character to show that what you see someone doing in one scenario may not reflect their persona perfectly. And I think it's unfair to judge a person based off of one example, based off of one time seeing them in said group. And maybe in said group they made a joke that didn't land. It takes a good amount of time and a good amount of energy that you need to put into somebody to really understand them. You can't just take a bird's eye view of them and say, yeah, that kid's a douchebag. I don't like what he's doing. Go get to know the person or talk to them about different things. Just because you guys radically differ about one belief doesn't mean that they're your worst enemy in the world. There's probably 10 other things that you guys would agree on and be like, oh, yeah, I think the same way, or I love to do that too. So I guess that duality of character just comes back to judgment, and we all are human. We all like different scenarios. Last point here I wanted to make is just like a funny observation. Some of the quietest people I've seen, especially throughout like early high school, have come out and outside of school are just the loudest people ever. And they're the same ones that in the hallways just wearing their earbuds, their head down, teacher calls on them. They can't get 2 words out because they just have like social anxiety in school for some reason. And outside of school, it's night and day. And this person is just off the walls and they have all these ideas flowing. And then in school, you'd be convinced that they only have half a brain. And it's like, wow, that's not who I thought they were. And that's just a prime example of not taking your one image for their whole character and cross-comparing and seeing somebody in a variety of settings. That may be a cause of ADHD. Not sure. That kind of mellows kids out in school. And those same ones are the ones outside of school. They get off their meds. They're like, whoa, this is crazy. I have not seen the world in this way. It makes me go, all right, next section. All right, I'm going to wrap this up here. I have a few last points. I always talk for way longer on some of these sections than I think I do, and then I run out of time because no one wants to watch a 2-hour podcast. So the last thing I wanted to talk about here is just an idea that I got from a mentor that I've had for years, and his name's Keith, and he owns a sneaker Discord business, and he runs the community and helps us resell sneakers. And he's one of the coolest people I've ever met. We may have something brewing on the Stoic Sapling soon, so stay tuned in. But he's my biggest inspiration, and I can say that with complete confidence. As you can see, Interstellar here, he's the one that put me on to Interstellar and the awesome movie it is. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about time dilation and relativity in space. And it's a simple physics concept, but it just always blows my mind. And it's the fact that time changes and time slows down for one as they speed up and as they approach the speed of light. And this is just the coolest idea to me, because if you were just to travel at the speed of light for a few years, blah, 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 come back to Earth, everybody would have aged and would probably be gone while you were just taking a little journey around the universe. And that idea of just time dilation and relativity is super cool to me. And seeing, and another great example is just looking up in the sky and you see a star. That light that you're seeing from the star is millions of years old because it took all that time to travel across the universe to finally hit your retina. That's all that you're seeing is what comes through your eye. And the light that is happening currently that is being reflected is going to take another 2 million years to travel across the universe and finally hit your eye. And just for a reference here, if you were to travel near the speed of light and get close up there, you would be traveling 186,000 miles a second. So in a second, you would just be gone. You could have wrapped the Earth around countless times in just 1 second by traveling near the speed of light. And I hope that interstellar travel and that travel near the speed of light is possible. But with current physics and with our understanding of it, it seems like it is probably not possible to ever reach that. But who's to say? We thought that we couldn't ever get a plane in the sky. We thought that we would never have cars that can move us across the country in less than 2 days. So that's a little section on physics and space. I keep it short because I don't have the knowledge to sit here and just keep on rambling out facts. I have to use Google. But I just want to shout out Keith, Adam again, his Discord endurance, and my biggest inspiration, period. Last thing I want to talk about here is one book. It's one book suggestion, and I haven't even finished it yet. So that's when you know the book is hitting and the book is good. And this book is called The Way of Kings, and it is a fantasy series. If I was to give it one comparison, I would say it's like Lord of the Rings. There's a lot of lore, a lot of names, a lot of lands, and it's a bit chaotic at the beginning. And there's actually 3 storylines in The Way of Kings, and they're all separate. But at this point in the book, I'm about midway through, all 3 storylines are converging, and this is where it's heating up. And I seriously think this is one of the best books I've ever read, and I haven't even finished it yet. Because all 3 storylines are coming together, and I cannot get enough. And any extra time I'm getting, I'm sitting down and reading an extra 2 pages. And I wish so bad that I didn't have calculus, and I didn't have to shoot this podcast. I'm kidding. Because I would use this time right now to read this book, because it's so damn good. And there's a lot of philosophy in it. There's a lot of people debating politics. There's some romance. This book has been worth the hype. The Amazon reviews are like 4.7 stars out of 5. So that's when I knew that I had to check this thing out, because usually Amazon books always have some low-ass reviews and people complaining about this or that. But it's lived up, and I've really enjoyed this book, and I think I'm going to continue the series. So I guess my suggestion would obviously be read The Way of Kings, but it's long as hell. It is a big commitment to read a 1,200-page book. So I guess my other suggestion is just pick up a fantasy book, because I lose myself in fantasy series. And it just seeing a whole different world, it always makes you ask, how did this writer produce this in his brain? This doesn't feel like it could have came from this earth. Someone with a much bigger range for creativity had to have written this. And I guess that's just a compliment of the authors of these great fantasy works, because it just blows my mind how they could get all their ideas out and build this whole new world that becomes so vivid in your brain when you begin to read it. So read a fantasy series. That's my last suggestion. Read any fantasy series, and you'll be amazed. And though the pictures that your brain can build, they're better than any movie or any TV show you've ever watched. Trust me. I hope to see you guys on the next one. I can officially promise some big guests are on the way. Big as in interesting and awesome people that I have wanted to get on the podcast for a while. So stay tuned. So with all that being said, hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Hopefully we'll see you on the next one. Peace.